Okay, so now we've got our message controller set up to get the inbox, outbox and read messages. What we'll take a look at now is getting the message thread, the conversation between two users. So if we take a look at our iMessage repository, then we've got the parameters in here to get the messages using the current user ID and the recipient ID. And change of plan. What we'll do, instead of using the recipient ID and the user ID, what we'll do is we'll change this to the string of the current username, and we'll use the string of the recipient's username as well, because we've been using that for everything up to now, and for consistency we'll take the recipient username as a parameter in the controller, and obviously we've always got access to the current username via the context of a controller. So what we'll do, we'll head over to the message repository and we'll update this to be a string of the current user name, and we'll make this a string of the recipient's username. And what we'll do inside here, let's bring this down as well because it's going off the screen. And what we're going to do inside here, obviously we're going to get the messages for both sides of the conversation. But what we'll also do inside here is we'll take the opportunity to mark any of the messages that have not currently been read, and we're going to mark them as read. What this does mean is that we're going to need to get the messages in memory, then do something with the messages, then we're going to have to map to a DTO. So we can't work with DTOs to update our database, so we're going to need to execute the request and get it out to a list, and then work with the messages inside memory here. So let's take a look, and what we'll do is we'll say var messages equals await and context.messages, and then we'll specify where, and we need to make our method async, and that should remove some of the annoying warnings as we go and build this particular query. And what we're going to put in this where statement, we want to get any messages where the recipient username is equals to the current username, and the sender username is equals to the recipient username, and vice versa as well. So it's going to be pretty lengthy, this one. So what we'll do in here is we'll say the message, M for message, and we want to get the m.recipient.username, and check that this is equal to the current username. And let's bring this parenthesis down. And what I'll also do while we're in here, I'm just going to say to list async as well, because this will remove the errors as we're working out this particular message. And it'll just give us a cleaner space to work in, because we need to put some logic in here to get the correct messages back. So we're going to check the recipient username is equal to the current username. And then we're going to add a double ampersand, and we're going to check that the message.sender.username is equal to the recipient username. And then we're going to add an or condition, and we're going to go the other way. So we're going to get the m.recipient.username equal to the recipient username. Then we'll add another double ampersand, and we'll say m.sender.username is equal to the current username. And then what we'll do underneath the where, before we pass this out to us a list, we're going to order by, and we're going to order by the m and the message sent. Now we're going to use the to list async here. We're not going to project out of this, because what we're also going to do inside here is we're going to take the opportunity to mark the messages as read. When a user gets the message thread, then any messages they've been sent will mark them as read during this process as well. So because we're not projecting, what we do need to do is eagerly load the photos for the user, because we're going to include those as well. So what we'll do is we'll say u goes to u.sender, and we'll then need to add a len include, and we'll say p goes to p.photos. And this is going to give us access to our user photos, obviously. I'm just going to copy this line down, and we'll need to do the same for the recipient, because we want to display the user's photo in the message design as well. So that's the first part of this. We get our messages or the message conversation between two users. And under this, what we'll do is we'll say var messages, or we're going to check for the unread messages. So we're going to say var unread messages equals, and we're going to take a look inside our messages that we have, and we're going to say where, and we want to check the date read. So we'll say m goes to m.dateRead, and we're going to check to see if this is null. And we also want to check that the message.recipient.username is equal to the current username. And then what we need to do, let's bring some of this down. And then what we need to do is get a list of lists, because we're going to need to loop over lists. And any unread messages where the recipient is the current username, we're then going to mark them as read. So what we'll do is we'll check inside here and we'll say if unread messages dot any, then what we'll do is we'll loop over these, and for any unread message that meets these conditions, we're going to mark as read. So what we'll do is we'll say for each, and then we'll say var message in unread messages. And inside here, we're going to say message.dateRead equals datetime dot, and we're going to bring in system for this, and we'll say datetime.now. And underneath the for each, we'll take the opportunity to save these changes to our database. So we'll say await context and save changes async. And then underneath this, what we'll do is we'll return our message DTO as a list. So what we'll do is we'll say return, and then we'll use our mapper and we'll say map, and we're going to go to an IEnumerable of type message DTO, and we're going to pass in our messages, and that's this particular method. So we get the conversation of the users. We'll then find out if there's any unread messages for the current user that they've received. We'll then mark them as read, and then we return the message DTOs. And then what we can do is go to our message controller to implement this. And we'll add a method in here to go and get the message thread. So what we'll do, we'll specify HTTP GET once again. And we'll need to give this a root parameter. And what we'll do is we'll say thread / and then in curly brackets we'll specify the username of the other user. Remember, we've always got access to the current username inside our controllers. So we only need to know who the other participant in this conversation is. So what we'll do is we'll say public async task, and we're going to return an action result from this. And it's going to be an IEnumerable, and it's going to be of type message DTO. And what we'll do is we'll say get message thread, and we'll pass in the string of the username. And of course, this is the other user. So what we need is our current username. So we'll say var current username equals user.getUsername. And then what we can do is say return OK, and we'll say await and message repository, and we'll say get message thread, and we need our current username and the other username, which is just called username in this case. And let's go back to Postman, and we've got a request here to go and get the messages, the thread between Lisa, who I'm logged in as, because this is the token that we're using, and we're going to get Todd's, the conversation between Lisa and Todd in this case. So let's click on send. And what we want to see inside here is that for any messages from Lisa, we're expecting to see date read as null, which is fine. But coming from the other way round, where we're the current username, the recipient is us, then what we want to see is the date read being set there. Okay, we now have the message thread capability on the API. And for now, we've finished with the functionality here as well on the API side. And what we'll do is go and see what we need to do on the client side to get this set up.